Today, we're going to be talking about something that ventures into some very difficult territory. And let me tell you, this is not something that I would recommend unpacking on your own. Coping strategies, or what I've heard called misery stabilizers, that keep us stuck in familiar patterns of suffering. So before we dive in, I'm creating this video for awareness and educational purposes. This is not a self-help guide. Please seek the right kind of support when navigating difficult emotional territory. And remember, the content on this channel is not a substitute for medical advice. Now, I always appreciate your comments, but with this video in particular, if you do make a comment, please be mindful of what you share. If you would like to book a call with me to talk about something or maybe unpack something, there is a link in the episode description. I can help you much more with a call and a conversation than I can in the comments section. So a misery stabilizer is something that we do that maintains a particular problem while protecting us from a deeper fear, uncertainty, or even responsibility. A lot of us unconsciously choose stable misery over unstable and vulnerable growth. And if you feel called out at all, if that feels hard to lean into, I'm going to be fully transparent at the end of this episode and share my own misery stabilizers, the things that I need to work really hard to manage. We all have them. So key characteristics of a misery stabilizer: it reduces anxiety in the short term. It preserves identity-specific roles or narratives, like, this is just how I am, this is just how things are. It facilitates avoiding emotional risk, conflict, and vulnerability, and it blocks meaningful change while appearing rational or necessary. Some common examples of misery stabilizers that are widely accepted as just kind of normal: staying in unhappy relationships to avoid loneliness or confrontation, spending a lot of time working to avoid emotional intimacy or being alone with yourself, chronic self-criticism and cynicism to avoid hope and disappointment, hyper-focusing on controlling our diet, controlling our body shape, to try and create feelings of safety or to avoid emotional vulnerability or uncertainty, and blaming circumstances and other people as a way of shying away from our own accountability or agency. Now, of course, all these things have downsides. If we work constantly to avoid vulnerability or intimacy, then we usually end up kind of lonely with dysfunctional relationships. If we go down the rabbit hole of trying to control our body size and shape and over-focusing on our diets, well, we all know where that goes. So why do we do these things? Why do we hold on to them? Essentially, they maintain a degree of predictability. They often protect against the short-term sting of grief, shame, fear, rejection, and they preserve our self-image. They protect a fixed understanding of how the world works. In other words, they give us a sense of certainty. Miserable certainty, but certainty nonetheless. We might find ourselves in a situation where life is far from perfect and we are not happy, but at least things are kind of predictable, and we might be protected a little bit from some of the worst of it, some of the most uncomfortable things. But misery stabilizers function as avoidant coping strategies. They create a downward spiral. The more we lean on them, the bigger the scary or unpredictable or vulnerable things feel. Living in the downward spiral of avoidant coping strategies, it steals our peace. Like we're living in glass houses, constantly hyper-aware of who's throwing rocks. And letting go of misery stabilizers often feels so much scarier in the moment than staying where we are or staying stuck. It is so easy when we come up against that barrier of whatever big emotion it is, while trying to maybe make our way out of a misery stabilizer, or while trying to break that cycle, to just go, tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. Not now. It's so easy to find reasons to delay taking action with these things. It's so easy to find reasons to go, oh God, like not now. Now's not the right time. I'll do it later. But later very rarely comes. We are never ready. But it's important that we handle this with tact and kindness. So a really important shift to make when we identify a misery stabilizer and we identify that pattern is, rather than getting mad with ourselves and all frustrated and saying, like, why can't I stop this? Like, why can't I just do something different? Or this doesn't make sense. It's not logical. Why am I doing this? Rather than doing that, rather than going down the self-criticism route and making things feel even worse, it's important that we ask, what might this be protecting me from? I once worked with an extremely smart and talented and successful individual who had been struggling with a very serious ED from a very young age. And they shared with me that growing up, their home was a war zone. Everyone was fighting, no one felt safe, and their mother in particular was brutal. She would come after people. Criticism, bickering, sniping, constantly. But as a really young child, they figured out that if they made themselves look small and frail, they'd get left alone. No one was going to pick on them. No one was going to pick on the person that seemed so fragile. This wasn't a conscious choice made by a wise adult with an understanding of eating disorders. This was an adaptive strategy thought up by a child in a very unsafe environment. And these things don't just go away because we become adults. They become wired into the emotional centers of our brain to the point where we feel driven to act them out when we feel scared or threatened. Often as adults, we reverse engineer the logic a little bit. We feel compelled to do something in a particular way or take a particular action. And maybe if we looked at that completely objectively, we'd be able to see there are some holes in it. But with our adult mind, when we are in pain, when we are scared, when we are stressed, if we feel like this is the thing that I need to do, we are very, very good at reverse engineering a logical reason to follow that path, because attempting to change these patterns brings up a lot of vulnerability and a lot of distress. When we get stuck in a pattern with a misery stabilizer, it's because the pain of change and the cost of change feels greater in the moment than the cost of staying the same. Particularly difficult when we're dealing with a problem that can happen behind closed doors, when we're dealing with a problem with food that no one else is a part of. When I'm working with couples who are navigating dysfunction and disconnection in their partnerships or in their marriages, the cost of staying the same becomes very real very quickly. There are two people kind of holding each other accountable, and if one of them doesn't follow through on something that they said they were going to follow through with, there are immediate ramifications. The stakes feel higher and more imminent. But if we're dealing with a problem that's just ours, that's happening behind closed doors, it is so hard to really get that momentum of change going, to talk ourselves into doing something differently, because it always feels so much easier to just go, no, not today. That's too hard. I'll deal with that later. So the goal is not to force our way through this or try to criticize or bully ourselves into change. Instead, we need to start by making the pattern of any misery stabilizers conscious. We need to start by shining the spotlight on them, seeing them for what they are. We need to honor the original protective function of the misery stabilizer. We need to recognize that at some point in time, a younger, less experienced version of me put this together because it was the best I could do at the time. We need to have some compassion for that while building better, safer alternatives that are actually in line with the life that you want to be living. But if we don't have a big enough reason to do this, it's really hard to gain traction. like I was saying, this is one of the biggest obstacles with addressing something like binge eating. It happens behind the curtain. It often happens when we're alone. And the cost of not dealing with it is often too abstract and future-based for us to really take difficult action in the moment. It's so easy to kick the can of that problem just down the road. Another obstacle we face here is a lack of belief that we can create something better. If we don't believe that the work that we're doing can actually lead to a life that we'd be happier living, then again, very, very hard to motivate ourselves to put one foot in front of the other with this. So yeah, we do need to shine a light on the cycle of the coping strategy, the cycle of the misery stabilizer, and understand how it might be protecting us in the short term, but making things worse or just keeping things miserable long term. We need to honor the original function of the misery stabilizer. We need to get curious about new, better alternatives. And those new alternatives will not just step in and replace the old thing. At first, they will not feel as satisfying. They will not scratch that same itch in the same way, and we need to accept that if we're going to move forward. But one of the real X factors here is finding a reason that means something to you personally, that makes it worth it. I often listen to a lot of parents say things like, I should be doing this for my kids. I should be getting healthy for my kids. I should stop binge eating and get a handle on my body image stuff because of my kids. And yeah, of course, that's a great reason. But often there's a lot of guilt that comes up with people around a reason like that because they think, I should be able to do this for my kids, but I can't. And that really messes with people. Any situation where you can write on paper any number of really good reasons why you maybe should change, but they just don't stick. They don't help rubber meet road in those moments. The guilt that people go through around that is huge. And I want to tell you, your reasons for doing this work, they have to be about you. Something you want. Yeah, we can do things for the people we love, but it has to be for you. How do you want to feel within yourself? How do you want to feel in your home? How do you want to feel when you show up in the world? And the body image side of this can be an absolute rat's nest because we can say, I'd feel so good about myself if I looked a particular way and showed up this way in this body because that's what I want for me. And that's what would feel good. But what is driving the desire for a particular body type? Is it really because that's just what your heart desires in all its wholesome glory? Or at some stage in your life were you made to feel like not looking that way meant that you're not enough? Taking difficult steps needs to be about so much more than fear. We can't really sustain ourselves with motivation that is based in insecurity. And I said I was going to be transparent about my own misery stabilizers. Well, here we go. Avoidant coping strategies like binge eating, alcohol, being a workaholic, they used to be my jam, not so much anymore. Like I still work a lot, but that's beside the point. It's more functional now, I hope. But that used to be my problem. I don't struggle with those things as much anymore. The misery stabilizing mindsets, like the kind of emotionally, psychologically protective mindsets that I need to be mindful of every single day, are cynicism and blame. So much easier to get cynical about the world and blame other people. Like, yeah, the problem is out there. Yeah, there are some problems out there, but there are also some things in here. Blame and cynicism protect me from facing my own shortcomings, but it also keeps me stuck and immobile. So if I'm not mindful of this every day, if I'm not challenging my tendency to be cynical, I'm not recognizing opportunities. I'm not taking the kind of action that would actually help my situation. And it's very, very easy for cynicism to masquerade as, oh, I'm just being a realist. And that's an example of how we kind of reverse engineer logic sometimes to cater to ourselves. But if there's one thing I'd like you to take from this video is that if you find yourself stuck in one of these cycles, if you notice that a misery stabilizer has made its way into your life, you can't bully or criticize your way out of it. We need to recognize the pattern, honor the original function, and make our way forward with the combination of accountability, kindness, and not a small amount of courage. Also, the right support. So if this speaks to you, please reach out for support, whether that's reaching out to me or someone else. If you would like to book a call to talk to me, there's a link in the episode description. My name's Marcus. This was Strong Not Starving. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.